So, as a warm-up question, what purpose do SATs serve, and what is the added value in analysis for those who are new to SATs? And this question goes to you both.
Okay, if I may start, I would say, of course, first of all, it's a technique. So, and in the name it says that it structures the analysis. So, first of all, it gives us a rough guidance and orientations for those who have, let's say, in a very pessimistic way, no idea how to conduct an analysis in the end. So it's a kind of a first entry point into more professionalism into the analysis. On the other hand, it can serve also as a kind of a cookbook to some extent. If you really are stuck into your analysis, you can refer to these techniques and can improve it. So it's not only giving you an organizational direction, it also gives you a direction within the process if you're stuck into it. And lastly, I would say it gives really a good idea why you should do these or why you should apply these techniques. So it gives you an idea what kind of drawbacks and phenomena you can maybe avoid by using these techniques. So that would be a rough summary from my point of view, the benefits of the SATs.
Ole, would you like to add something?
Well, yeah, I hope I do not repeat something, but I think structured analytic techniques are, well, they are mainly used to avoid cognitive pitfalls, like biases, heuristics, and intuitive traps. At the same time, they are intended to increase the accuracy of analysis, and at the same time, SATs enable analysis results to be more transparent and comprehensible. And I think this is not only important if something goes wrong, but also in case something is going exceptionally well. I think only this way we can learn. And well, and finally, SATs enable and even require that analysis are seen as collaborative endeavors. The days in which individual analysts were able to do their analysis alone at their desks are supposed to be a thing of the past, I think. And SATs can facilitate this collaborative process from my point of view.
That's certainly we're going to discussions. In what circumstances is the use of SATs particularly beneficial?
Yeah, it's very beneficial, of course, if you have a kind of a heterogeneous team. And by heterogeneous team, I do not mean by in the sense of that you have coming from different origins, but maybe even from different competence levels and skill levels. And I guess this is a context that you come close to, or that you experience mainly also in a kind of a military mission context, definitely where not all the especially in the multinational, for example, in multinational organization, where people maybe have not shared the same or do not share the same competence level. And in this context, this can give you something like a common denominator or a common code book that everybody can follow and can therefore develop an acceptance of the techniques and the processes. In this context, it's very, very helpful to give a really rough orientation. And of course, this kind of advantage, and we will come to this point on a later stage in this discussion, this is also, of course, a disadvantage because maybe it already paves the ways in a certain direction that maybe will hinder flexible or adaptive analysis, but that's for later on. So in this context, where you have heterogeneous team members with different skill levels, this really helps you to improve the analysis. And the last thing that I would like to mention here is also in the inter-organizational context. If you have difficulties to make clear how you conduct an analysis and how your processes are shaped, having something like the SATs help other organizations or members of other organizations to understand how you come to the conclusion, how you come to analytical products.
Ole, would you like to add something?
Everything. So not in this case. I agree totally. I think It's not just between organizations, it's also inside organizations. If you have different branches, usually they after a certain period of time, they all think alike to a certain degree, work the same way, and it can be hard to even bring together different branches of the same organization. And if you have a common framework like structured analytic techniques, you can exchange and work together much more effectively, I think.
So on the one hand, SATs can sort of coverage to facilitate collaboration, but it also helps to avoid groupthink. If I get you right there. Okay, he's nodding. There's an ever-increasing amount of SATs out there. Based on your experience, which SATs would you recommend in terms of types and what stages, and probably you have some SATs already in mind which have proved to be particularly useful.
Mm-hmm. In this case, I would recommend to start with Ole maybe first.
All right. Well, if I had to pick only one analytical technique, that would definitely be the analytical spectrum by Fearson and Fearson. And I know it is currently not treated as structured analytic technique, at least if you look to the standard book of Fearson and Hoyer. But I think in the end, it is an enormously powerful thinking tool that can help each and every analyst. So if you have not dealt with the analytical spectrum so far, I can highly recommend to do this.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, I did. And Markus, if I can pick up this point for a second, could you give us a brief introduction on what the analytical spectrum is?
Well, a brief introduction would be that the analytical spectrum covers most analytical questions you can ask and most types of analysis you can perform. And it consists of 4 different steps, and you begin at the first step with this, which is the descriptive analysis level, and there you ask for the typical journalistic questions like who did what, where, and so forth. And as you climb higher the steps of the analytical spectrum to the second step, you ask for motive and reasons. So you ask the question why. So why are the things like they are? And the last step, the 4th step, would be the estimative analysis, in which you ask questions about the future. So on these 4 different steps, you have like the whole range of different questions, and you can use the analytical spectrum simply. Well, you can use it in multiple ways, because one advantage is if you have a question, you can try to decide on which step of the analytical spectrum does this question fit, to orient yourself and to decide, all right, what is my task? And maybe even more important, what is not my task? And then you can try to, I call it, to mirror the question down or up the analytical spectrum. And then maybe you can decide, all right, my customer just asked a descriptive question, but he will not be capable of understanding the whole range of dynamics at play if I do not also answer the question, why are things like they are? And so you can like play with the analytical spectrum, and that's very helpful from my point of view.
I think it sounds like we definitely should provide the bibliography afterwards and share it with our audience so they can read up things. Markus, what's your experience?
So it was really interesting to listen to Ole and his preferred technique, so to say. And from my point of view, I would say that my preferred technique is scenario thinking, so to say, and scenario development. For scenario development, of course, you need to have all the other techniques or steps beforehand to create good scenarios. But to be honest, in the end, forecasting, foreseeing, or estimating future development paths is very important for many organizations. And that's what I say to my students. The fun fact with scenario development is you can train it every day. You can even train it in your personal life, even if you wait for a bus. You can ask yourself, okay, when will a scenario come into reality, and how much the bus will be delayed, and for how many people you maybe meet there, and so on. Also, you can really use scenario thinking as something as a daily business and a daily exercise. And it's, from my point of view, it's important because we have really difficulties in foreseeing the future. We see this right now with a real life experiment with the pandemic situation, that it's really hard to say, okay, how is this thing going to be in the next days, weeks, and so on. And I know from the practice, and I guess this is an experience that many of the military analysts maybe will share on the one hand, but also civilian organizations will share the same experience, that it's absolutely crucial to have an idea of what's coming up. And there's one point that I always stress with my students, and that I had also difficulties within my professional career, to make clear what the difference between probability and possibility is. And that's something that I really would like to stress. And the scenario thinking technique and scenario development gives you a good idea that thinking in possibilities is maybe not thinking in probabilities firsthand. And the second thing is, and I guess this is something that we will discuss also later on, is it's the most important interface from my point of view with regard to the decision-making process in whatever kind of organization, also in a military organization, because people will always ask you, okay, what do you expect is going to happen? Because this is going to give orientation and direction to operations. And as a good analyst, I always recommend to my students, by this question, you need to stay very stable and maybe even denying an answer in the sense of, I can't give you a good conclusion to which one of those scenarios is maybe the most probable one. And that's also this kind of really thrilling and exciting moment in developing scenarios. And therefore, having a good training in this SIT, so to say, and having good experiences and good skills in that one is absolutely crucial. And the fun fact here is that, just to tell you a short story from the real world, that in the last year, in around April, we were contacted as a team by one of the federal ministries of the German government. I'm not naming which one. And there was a high-level expert meeting talking about the development of the pandemic and the impact to the society. And I found it really interesting that I was once again, as a professor who is maybe not the most prominent analyst if you look at Germany at all, but I was then asked in a personal meeting with one of the representatives of the ministry whether I can give him a clear forecast how long the German society will stand a lockdown. That was then, that was around April when we were in the first phase of lockdown. And I was really up there. So why do I don't have a record button? Because, when I tell to my students that this is actually, that's exactly this kind of situation where you need the training in techniques, and you need to know what are the strengths and the weaknesses of your technique, and you need to communicate those products to decision makers. That's something where you get prepared by those techniques exactly for this real world incidents, where you need to be, you need to be in the position to make a good communication in that kind. And yeah, so making a long story short, I would say, from my point of view, the scenario development is one of really crucial techniques that I also prefer and I also like to train and to teach.
That's a very convincing statement you made. Thank you. Tayo just sent me a link by share with you. Just let me do it for her. It's the analogy you were talking about. is the one you were mentioning? It's slightly different, I believe. Or Masayo, maybe you want to comment on that one.
It is different from Pearson's analytical spectrum, because Pearson's analytical spectrum just consists of 4 different steps, and you can look it up in the book Strategic Thinking for Intelligence Analysis. And for intelligence, on page 50 is the picture. So this would be the right place to look. Otherwise, I made a German version, so to speak, because I wrote an essay about the analytical spectrum, which can be found on my homepage. So this would be, at least for the German-speaking participants, a possibility to look it up.
Okay, all right. As I said, a bibliography afterwards. At this point, I wanted to remind also our audience, if you have a question, especially now about the benefits of SATs, please just raise your hand or switch on your camera, and I will then give you the word. In the meantime, please allow me one last question on that topic from my side. SATs are also called the biasing techniques. So which cognitive biases have the most profound impact on analysis in your experience, and which SATs do you recommend to address those? Are there even SATs which common biases?
Ole, would you like to start once again? I have started so many times, and it's maybe unpolite, so I'd like to give you the chance to start first.
Well, I think it is hard to tell which cognitive biases are the most, let's say, important ones, because they all have their place in an analysis. What Pearson does in his newer works is he is trying to connect specific techniques with specific biases and heuristics. So there's, in the literature, there's you can find these things, but from my point of view, the biggest cognitive biases which are a problem, at least from my point of view, is confirmation bias, so that you are just seeking evidence supporting your theory, your hypotheses, your argument, and so you're trying to verify what you already think and believe, and you're not trying to falsify this. And the classical technique to counter this would be the analysis of competing hypotheses, for example. So this for this, and there's also, I think, a very, very important intuitive trap, and this is haven't sufficient cognitive bins for things. So if you start into an analysis project, usually very fast you get an idea where your argument is heading and what your preferred answer to the question is. And if you just start with this, you do not have the sufficient cognitive bins to process information and to regard information as important if you do not have these bins. So for this, an analysis of competing hypotheses with a good set of hypotheses also is a good start into analysis, because each hypothesis gives you a mental bin for information to process. And so, well, yeah, the SAH would be one technique facilitating these. But in the end, all idea creation techniques or idea generation techniques, or like in the new books, it's called explorational techniques. They all give you these mental bins for hypotheses, ideas, concepts that you then can use in your analysis projects.
Let me start tackling this question from another direction. And let me start by telling you my favorite dispute that I have even with good colleagues, and where we sometimes fight over it and sometimes we find consensus. And that's not dependent on the amount of beer that we maybe have at night at the bar, where we do mostly discuss these kind of issue. It starts with the question, can you really train analytical thinking? Because that's something that it's implicit with those techniques, that you can take someone from outside, from common street, so to say, and bringing into an office and giving him SATs to read, and then in the end he's able to make a good analysis. What I would like to say here is that obviously analytical thinking needs some predispositions, cognitive predispositions, so to say. You have to be some intellectual capabilities and yeah, also some skills. Otherwise, you're not able to apply those techniques. And that's one of the most important messages also, is that the techniques is not a guarantee to overcome those cognitive biases. They just are helpful indicators, so to say. So at least they give you an indication that you maybe have fallen short to one of those cognitive failures. To summarize this argument is that in the end, if they help already, let's say, I wouldn't say gifted, but experienced and skillful analytical thinkers to avoid maybe easy traps that you maybe tap into it. The second thing is that we really have right now good research results concerning those cognitive biases. Without those research results, that mainly come from psychology and also social psychology, I wouldn't say even the SATs wouldn't be possible, so to say, as an idea, as a book, as a project, as something that we really can train. But on the other hand, what we need to accept is that in the end, what you see with the SATs is something that you normally also learn in a good academic career. It's scientific thinking, right? So in the end, what you apply here is good techniques that help you through a jungle of complexity that even every scientist is confronted with, where he needs to make decisions about abstraction, how to see the world, in what kind of level of abstraction, what to select as drivers, as assumptions, as variables, as factors. And then, of course, based on critical rationalism, that is a good philosophical tradition in let's say, in our scientific community, that you always start from the point that whatever you believe and whatever you assume, the first thing that you should always believe in is that you are wrong. And based on that one, you're going to take the next steps to develop a scientific explanation. And in that way, I would say it's really helpful to steer and to control or monitor, or even giving you a technical mentoring to something that we really don't like, and that is that we don't like to prove ourselves wrong, and that's within the DNA of every human, so to say. Even scientists do not like to be proven wrong, right? And that's where we sometimes really have to reverse our thinking process, in the sense that it's yeah, to some extent it's even schizophrenic. And I do not know how many schizophrenic staff members do you already know. Not going too much in this discussion, but to be schizophrenic, it means that if you have this kind of Jekyll and Hyde person in yourself, and that's something that you don't want to play too openly, so to say. And that's making, once again, maybe a long story really short, but that's something that really helps people to really keep on track on those kind of falsification issue, that you really always ask yourself, I guess I'm wrong. What I need to do that I can be proven right. And that's what I say. It's very important with the SATs and the cognitive biases.